You're listening to Packers Talk Network.
You're listening to No Huddle Radio on the Packers Talk Radio Network, your home for in-depth and thoughtful Packer analysis. I'm your host, Gil Martin. My co-host is my good friend, Sean Tehan. In addition to this show, I write for the Packers Post and Cheesehead TV. And Sean was a TV sportscaster in Minnesota. We're here to talk Packers because you're all here for one thing, and that's a love for Green Bay football. Sean, can you believe it? OTAs, minicamp, all done. It's just a couple of weeks now, well, 4 or 5 until the start of training camp. But before we delve into the closing of OTAs, how about a word from our sponsor?
Yeah, and the regular season's just around the corner too, Gil. Before we get started, a few words about our sponsor, Wisconsin's own Ticket King. For over 30 years, Ticket King has been providing Packers tickets to Packer fans. You can find them on the web at theticketking.com or visit their locations in Green Bay and Milwaukee. For direct links to specific Packers game tickets, go to packerstalk.com/tickets or browse their website at theticketking.com. And the Packers, they just wrapped up mini camp. Now they break for a little bit of summer vacation before training camp rolls around next month, just over a month away. And we're about 7 weeks away from the start of the NFL preseason, too, in the Hall of Fame game. It's right around the corner, Gil.
Yeah, we are getting this next like 4 or 5 weeks is the deadest part of the offseason where very little happens. Everybody is on vacation. They're resting their bodies. They're preparing for what is obviously a grueling season ahead physically and mentally. But it's also a time of great anticipation, and I am looking forward to this season and just hearing how optimistic everybody is coming out of OTAs.
And you took the words right out of my mouth where this offseason, all this talk that we're hearing from the Packers right now, it's getting Packer fans, you and I and Packer fans included, just very excited, especially where last year how they just showed so much promise and just fell a little short. And really, we're really close to almost playing for a chance to win the conference and go to the Super Bowl. But we noted in the prior episode how Jordan Love, he told the media the bond within the locker room, on the field, it's outstanding. There's a ton of energy in the building. Since he's been with the Packers, it's the closest the team has ever been. And then Quay Walker, he backed that up earlier this week too, noted how strong the chemistry is. Now, Quay Walker's national champ. He was a national champ in college for the Georgia Bulldogs. He said chemistry being present at this time, it's a very good sign. You have Rashan Gary telling the media where him and the defensive line, they're going to get together for a couple of weeks leading before training camp and between now and the start of training camp, just to get together, whether it's in California or Texas, to work out together. The camaraderie is very good. That's a very good thing. It's not something we could say about this Packers team a few years ago, but the camaraderie seems to be very good, and that's only a good thing for a football team. It can't be a bad thing, but it's only a good thing.
Yeah, no, it certainly can't hurt to have a closely knit team, and it's great to see some of those loose ends like Jair Alexander last year, suspended one game for conduct detrimental to the team. He's all on board. Guys are getting healthy. Guys are working hard, and guys are pulling together. I mean, you see some of the young wide receivers sharing an apartment and working together to make each other better. That's the kind of attitude you want to see on this team. And let's face it, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, we didn't necessarily see that attitude up and down this roster.
And you got to think too, that was probably because it was an older roster and guys with families and private lives, and also it was a little cliquey. It seemed like too, where with that older group, and now you have a group of young guys where Preston Smith is the only guy who's in his 30s on this football team right now, and it's a lot of young guys who are just growing together and learning together and going through the growing pains together and hopefully win a lot of games together too. So it's just nice to see that as well. But with minicamp, though, this past week, Gil, some things that stood out to you. I know for me, it's Matt LaFleur talking glowingly about Romeo Doubs, where there's not really a number one receiver on this Packers team. And that's the way I feel like a lot of people like it, because there's just a lot of talent from top to bottom in that receiver room. But he talked about how Romeo Doubs just hasn't really had a bad day so far. Every day has been really, really good. He's opened his stride as a runner, which LaFleur said was a priority for Doubs this offseason after last year. A lot of good things, promising things. What stood out to you this past week with minicamp going on in Green Bay?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Romeo Doubs. I've always been a Romeo Doubs fan. He's one of those guys. You look at his his scouting report, and there's no one thing he does extremely well, but there's no one thing he does poorly either. He is just consistently very good.
Yeah.
And you need guys like that who are reliable, who are consistent, who are balanced and well-rounded in their skill sets. And, he may not be the fastest guy or the biggest guy, but he may be the most consistent guy and the most reliable guy. And, when it's 3rd and 7 and you need 7 or more yards, very often you're going to look for Romeo Doubs. So I really, really like to hear Matt LaFleur saying good things about Doubs. And, to me, the thing that stood out most was the attitude, just the fact that this team seems very cohesive, very united, very eager to get things started this season. There are 2 players who still have contracts that are extensions that are being negotiated, Kenny Clark and Jordan Love. Both of them sounded optimistic. Both of them sounded positive that these deals will get done in the next 4 weeks before 4 or 5 weeks before training camp actually starts. There is just a lot of positivity right now coming out of Green Bay, and that is, to me, the biggest thing I'm focusing on.
And how about Zayne Anderson?
Yes.
He had a heck of a mini camp. Talk about that.
3 interceptions in one day. Not bad. And that you add into the equation the fact that, a lot of the other safeties were not in attendance, excused absence from the mini camp. So Zayne Anderson gets more reps. He takes full advantage, 3 picks. And, if I would have told you, oh, yeah, yesterday at minicamp, a Packers safety had 3 interceptions, how many guesses would it have taken you to get to Zayne Anderson?
Yes, many guesses. It's a guy who was on the Packer roster all of last year. He won a Super Bowl earlier in his career with the Kansas City Chiefs, but you never really saw that guy ever. There's a kind of a running joke among Packer fans where, oh, this guy doesn't exist. He's just a name on the roster. We've never actually seen him before, but it went to show where it was kind of funny where, that guy, Zayne Anderson, actually made a bunch of plays in camp. A guy who's been pretty invisible and pretty easy to miss if you're a Packer fan. Even if you're a diehard Packer fan, he could walk right by you and you probably wouldn't know he played for the Green Bay Packers. But that just goes to show where the defense had some good days of mini camp this week. Even Rashan Gary, he was talking about also how the new scheme is very much an attack scheme, a very aggressive scheme. Preston Smith, he said he's going to attack the QB way more than previous years. Hopefully, I don't see Preston Smith ever lining up on Justin Jefferson outside ever again. I hope I never see that. I hope his hand's in the ground. He's attacking the quarterback in those situations. But Rashan Gary is a guy who also at this time last year, he was still recovering from that ACL tear he suffered in 2022. Now he's full go. He can work on other stuff. He's not focused on rehab. He's full go. He's all in. Rashan Gary, though, he's been so productive, yet he's never had more than 10 sacks in a year. And his career high is 9.5 sacks, which he had, I believe, in year 3 of his NFL career. Gil, where would you say would you say that you bet the over on Rashan Gary sacks, especially if this defense is going to be in such an attack mode coming up this year?
Assuming he stays healthy, yeah. I mean, I've always respected Rashan Gary's work ethic, his football IQ, his ability, his just athletic ability, pure and simple.
Yeah.
I think with this new defense under Jeff Hafley, he will take full advantage of that. If he's healthy and he's now more than a year removed from that terrible knee injury that he suffered in Detroit. Why does everyone get hurt in Detroit?
The turf, Gil, yes, the turf.
The turf monster in Detroit is bad. But I think he's ready to put it all together. I am predicting a Pro Bowl season for the first Pro Bowl season for Rashan Gary this year.
It's just funny because he is so, when it comes to pressures and QB hits, he is as good as he's up there in the upper echelon of the league. It's just the sack numbers haven't really shown it. But anyone who watches this team closely, if you just look at Rashan Gary's sacks, it's like, oh, this guy's not that good a pass rusher. No, that guy impacts the game like crazy. He really does at defensive end, especially when you have Kenny Clark in the middle too, and Preston Smith, who's so darn dependable. He has been his entire Packer career. I really like Preston. And now you're getting some other guys where you have some other talent on that defense where Rashan Gary, hopefully, it seems like he's obviously a huge focal point for opposing offenses, but he has the ability to take over a game, and he's definitely a huge focal point in opposing offenses. I think that's why the sack numbers aren't as high as we should see, but it's not for a lack of trying or a lack of effort. Rashan Gary is definitely here to stay, and I anticipate a big year, especially if all the things the Packers are saying where it's going to be an aggressive style of defense. I expect him to definitely clear double digits in sacks for the first time in his NFL career.
Yeah, I agree. I think it happens this year, and I think he builds from there, and it's great to see. The other thing about Rashan Gary, and this goes back to even his college days, because I followed him at Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
He was one of the top recruits out, in the.
I believe he was number one. I believe
Yes.
He was the number one recruit coming out of high school.
Correct. And then he was willing in college to sacrifice his personal statistics in order to occupy multiple blockers to allow his teammates to make plays. That's the kind of guy he is. That's the kind of player he is. And, the willingness to sacrifice for the good of the team, that's been great to see. And I think we'll see him now personally reap the rewards for that this year.
I'm pretty sure there's something where his body fat is under 10% for how large he is. He's an insane. He's a machine, and he's such a warrior. And again, where last year he had that in the home opener, he had that 3-sack game against the Saints and that comeback win. And he was a huge reason why the Packers were able to come back and steal that one early in the year. And that was the difference between them making the playoffs and missing the playoffs. That game was really, and Rashan Gary, just seeing how emotional he was, and he was just crying and just saying how I do this for you guys. I do this for the team. I do this because I love football. He loves football. And
he does.
And I love that. Hey, Green Bay, if you love football, Green Bay, Wisconsin's the perfect place for you. It really is. And I just love that he's one of us, and he's going to be one of us for a while. But we had mentioned, we're talking about Rashan Gary, though. You had mentioned the contract situations coming up where Jordan Love, it sounds like he's near a contract extension, Gil. Love was asked about it. He didn't talk a lot about it. He kept his answers pretty short, but said he's optimistic an extension does get done before camp starts, as it is what he has heard. It really does sound like a deal is going to get done pretty soon within the next month.
It sounds like a formality. It's not. Obviously, nothing is done until it's done.
Yeah.
But the fact that he is optimistic at this stage, and there doesn't seem to be any bad blood between the agent and the player and the team, that is very, very encouraging. And, all the reports say that the first number in this contract, as far as the amount per year, will be a 5. But we'll see. And it looks like he's going to be one of the top 2 or 3 highest paid quarterbacks in the game by the time the season starts.
And you know what? By this time the season ends or next season ends, he's going to be probably number 10 on that list because the quarterback market moves so freaking fast these days. It's unbelievable. Just wait until other quarterbacks like Patrick Mahomes or I'm just trying to think Dak Prescott, if he gets a bit, Dak Prescott's up to be a free agent next year. It doesn't sound like Dallas is going to re-sign him. So Packers obviously trying to get that deal done with him before Dak hits the market next year. But then Kenny Clark, you had mentioned Kenny Clark. We're talking about him. Obviously a terrific player on that defense. Arguably their best defensive player a season ago. He's eligible to become a free agent next year. Now, he's already had 2 contracts, and he's up for a 3rd contract. Green Bay doesn't sign a lot of players with 3rd contracts, Gil. Last one was David Bakhtiari, which it obviously backfired. He only appeared 20 games after signing that contract extension late in the 2020 season and before tearing his ACL on New Year's Eve 2020. The one last middle finger from 2020 to the Green Bay Packers right there for sure. But Clark spoke to reporters earlier this week, said contract talks are ongoing. He says he loves it in Green Bay, loves his teammates, the organization, wants to retire a Packer. Gil, the burning question is, does Kenny Clark deserves a 3rd contract? Should he get one or should he not? And when should he get a 3rd contract?
I would like to see him get a 3rd contract. I think he is the glue that holds the defensive line together. There is a big drop-off right now between where Kenny Clark is and where the next best defensive lineman on this team is. I think he gives them veteran leadership, even though he's not 30 or above. But he gives them leadership. He's experienced. He is one of the rare interior defensive linemen who can both stop the run and pressure the quarterback. Those guys don't grow on trees. Multiple Pro Bowls so far. I would like to see him get one more contract with the Packers. I know the team does not give out too many third contracts, but to me, Kenny Clark should get one. I don't want to see it be 5, 6, 7 years, but to give him 3 or 4 years, I wouldn't go past 5. I think that could be a win-win for player and team.
Now, Clark is coming off of his best statistical season of his NFL career. He registered a career best 7.5 sacks, 9 tackles for loss, and 16 quarterback hits last season. And a guy who he seems like he's just gotten better every year. He really has. And the unique situation with this is that Kenny Clark turns 29 in October. Not a lot of guys who are eligible for third contracts are they're usually approaching 30 or they're at 30 years old. He's not even 30. He's going to be 30 in a year and a half. He's still got some time before the magic number 30 hits. He's only missed 7 games in his 8 years in the NFL. The dude is absolutely durable. But Gil, that begs another question though from me to you, where do you want to see Kenny Clark get a third contract before camp, or do you want the Packers to wait and see if he can get through this season and maybe wait until during the season or after the season, kind of like what they've done with Elton Jenkins, what they did with David Bakhtiari in the past, and other guys?
You know, the price only goes up the longer you wait. That's my feeling. To me, if you can lock him down now before other guys start signing extensions, you're probably better off. He's going to want, top of market money or near very close to it. He deserves that kind of money. And I think the sooner they lock him up, the better. Yeah, there's a risk of injury, but you know what? There's always a risk of injury. You wait 6 months and there's still that risk. So I would like to see him sign sooner rather than later, but we'll see what Brian Gutekunst does. Look, they just got Devondre Campbell officially off the cap a couple of weeks ago. So let's see how they put that money to use.
And it's interesting because it's been a very good offseason to be a really good interior defensive lineman. You have guys like Chris Jones from the Chiefs, who became the NFL's highest paid D tackle with an average yearly salary of $31.75 million. Aaron Donald is still the second highest paid defensive tackle right now in the NFL, even though he retired a few months ago. But the Rams are still going to pay him in case he does come back. Christian Wilkins, the former Miami Dolphin, got a massive payday from the Raiders in free agency, $27.5 million a year. Justin Madubuike from the Ravens had a career season. He just got $24.5 million a year. Derek Brown from the Panthers got a $24 million a year extension as well. Gil, put on your GM cap. If you're Brian Gutekunst, what are you willing to pay Kenny Clark? What kind of contract are you willing to give him with all those guys in mind? Because in my opinion, he's not Chris Jones, but I think he's better than Derek Brown.
Yeah, I think that's about right. And, knowing Brian Gutekunst, he's going to set this up in a way where the Packers can manipulate the bonuses and restructure if needed. I think this will be bonus heavy, salary light, and then restructurable.
How many years would you give Kenny Clark?
Like I said, somewhere between 3 and 5. 4 would be ideal to me.
I think 4 years is going to be the deal, mainly because all these contracts, minus the Chris Jones deal, the Christian Wilkins deal, the Justin Madubuike deal, the Derek Brown deal, they were all 4-year deals. In the words of Janet Jackson, what have you done for me lately? And that's exactly what Kenny Clark's agent is looking at, where it's like, hey, these guys got 4 years. My guy's getting 4 years as well. Yeah. And I would honestly, if I'm Brian Gutekunst, in total, I would probably do somewhere 4 years, $100 million. It's a little more than Derek Brown. It's a little more than Justin Madubuike. It's below Christian Wilkins. I think Vegas really overpaid for Christian Wilkins. Christian Wilkins is a terrific player, don't get me wrong, but I don't know if he was worth paying more than Justin Madubuike, who had, 14 sacks last year for the Ravens, had a phenomenal season. Yeah. At the Raiders, that's where free agency is for the desperate. It really is for certain positions. I mean, the Packers, they paid Xavier McKinney and Josh Jacobs. They're paying those guys a lot of money because of free agency. But if I'm Brian Gutekunst, if I get a 4-year, $100 million deal done with Kenny Clark, if I get it done before training camp, oh baby, that's ideal. And even if it's, I'd like it to be before the season though. If it's before training camp, even better. If it's during training camp, fine. Even if it's during the season, just don't let this guy sniff the open market. I'm with you, Gil. Where the longer you wait, the more dangerous you're gonna get in a more dangerous territory if you're Green Bay.
Absolutely. Look, you can lock down Love and Clark. That sets you up for the future, I think, on both sides of the ball.
Now, minicamp obviously wrapped up, as we alluded to, and training camp is just over a month away. Guys who were not present at minicamp include new safety Xavier McKinney, corner Jair Alexander, cornerback Keyshawn Nixon, and new running back Josh Jacobs, but all were excused absences. Head coach Matt LaFleur said all 4 players, they've been in Green Bay all offseason. He told them not to come to minicamp to reward them for their presence this offseason, and all 4 players did exceed their practice time requirements for workout bonuses. Very good. And instead of the former Packer who's busy doing ayahuasca potentially, who it's obviously a good thing where LaFleur said, hey, go away. We don't need you until training camp. We don't need you right now, but we appreciate you being here.
Yeah, no, again, I just see a lot more positivity and cohesiveness coming out of this organization right now than where we were 2 or 3 years ago. And it's encouraging. Look, does that guarantee success? No, but it certainly contributes to success.
Yeah, it definitely does. It's just the more guys who are present, the more you can get done. And I just remember I only played at the high school level. I didn't play beyond that. But every day you missed, the coaches would stress where, hey, you're falling behind if you're not here. And you're making the team fall behind, and it's affecting everything. And it's just like that at every level. If you're not there, you're behind. You're falling behind the competition. That's just the way it is. But just a lot of excitement, though, and it's good to see where. And I think Keyshawn Nixon, too, even though he was excused from minicamp, he was still at minicamp. He just wasn't dressed. He wasn't participating, but He was still there. That's awesome.
Yeah, and you know, it shows that the players want to be around each other. They want to be there,
and they care.
Yeah, exactly. And that to me speaks volumes. Look, again, does it mean this team is going to win? No, it doesn't. But it certainly, it's an ingredient toward success and toward winning. And I think it's difficult to win if you don't have that cohesiveness.
Mm-hmm. I 100% agree, Gil. And just before we wrap up real quick, the Packers did announce their family night scrimmage at Lambeau Field will be on Saturday, August 3rd. Again, that's a great time for the families, introducing the little ones to football, to Lambeau Field. I know my oldest niece personally, my wife and I, our oldest niece, she wants to go to Lambeau Field one day. Family night's the perfect segue, I feel like, where it's a long day. It's a long trek up to Green Bay and back. That's a long day. It's a long game. Take them to a family night scrimmage, Saturday, August 3rd at Lambeau Field. That's a great way to introduce your kids to football. And then also the Packers signed rookie first-round pick Jordan Morgan, which means the entire rookie class is now signed and ready to go for training camp.
Signed, sealed, and delivered. So that's good news. And look, you know, in this day and age, signing your draft class is much more of a formality because it's all predetermined. You know, maybe how you write out some of the bonus money and guaranteed money is a little bit flexible, but these deals get done. The days of first round holdouts are thankfully very much behind us in the 2020s.
It was a very good thing when the NFL did a rookie pay scale. Sam Bradford was the last bonus baby who was the number 1 overall pick, and it was just insane money where it's good the NFL kind of did something like that. And then you had teams like the LA Chargers when they're in San Diego still try to underpay Joey Bosa as the 3rd overall pick, where it's just the Chargers being cheap. That reminds me, I'm going to veer off a little bit of the Packers real quick. I'm sorry about that, but that just reminds me of the story when they moved from San Diego to LA, and there was in the contract, it said the Chargers would cover all expenses if the practice facility was more than 100 miles away from San Diego. Guess what? It was 98 miles away, meaning the players all had to pay for it. Hey, glad the Packers they could be a cheap mom and pop operation, but they're not in comparison to the Chargers. So, point being, coming all around, pay Kenny Clark.
I need to bring it back around somehow, you know.
I had to. It's always funny. I always got football in my mind, and that's just one of the funnier stories of just how cheap that franchise is. And I love San Diego. I love California's great, but
yes,
the Chargers are cheap. But anyways, back to the Packers. Gil, before we wrap up with some trivia, what articles you have coming up online for the Packers Post, Cheesehead TV as well?
Well, for the Packers Post, I looked at the fact that there are only 3 players on this 90-man roster for the Packers that will turn 30 before this season is over. And they may not all make the team either. So this is a very young Packers team. And then for Cheesehead TV, talked a little bit about Jordan Love and how eager he is to build on last year's success and to just sort of erase the bitter memory of that loss to the 49ers in the playoffs.
The 3 players I'm probably thinking: Preston Smith, Andre Dillard, and Eric Wilson.
You got 2 of them right.
Man, okay. I won't spoil it. Just
okay.
Go read Gil's story if you're listening. So you ready for some trivia, Gil?
I am ready for some trivia.
Well, we had talked about the possibility of Kenny Clark getting a rare 3rd multi-year contract from the Green Bay Packers. Jordan Love is about to sign his 2nd multi-year contract with the Packers, including his rookie deal. Former Packers quarterback Aaron Rodgers has signed 5 multi-year contracts with the team before he was traded to the Jets following the 2022 season. The aforementioned David Bakhtiari, he signed 3 multi-year contracts with the Packers as well. Former Packers kicker Mason Crosby also signed 4 consecutive multi-year contract extensions with the team. Now, prior to Bakhtiari, Gil, who is the last non-quarterback and non-specialist to sign 3 consecutive multi-year contracts with the Packers?
Ooh, that is a good question.
It doesn't happen often. That's why I was thinking.
No,
I had to do some research for this one.
Boy. I'm thinking it was an offensive lineman.
It's an offensive player.
An offensive player. Donald Driver.
It was not, but it is a receiver though.
Okay. A receiver.
White Lightning.
Jordy Nelson.
Jordy Nelson, yes. Before his rookie contract expired in 2011, Nelson signed a 3-year, $13 million extension with the team. And before that contract expired in 2014, the Packers gave Nelson a 4-year, $39 million contract. Nelson, obviously, terrific career with the Packers. He caught 550 passes for 7,848 yards, scored 69 touchdowns in 9 seasons with the Packers. He was named the NFL's Comeback Player of the Year in 2016 after he missed the entire 2015 season with a torn ACL, suffered in a preseason game at Pittsburgh, that terrible turf there. Nelson caught 97 balls for 1,257 yards, and that season led the NFL with 14 touchdown receptions. Nelson's currently the Packers' 6th all-time leading receiver behind Donald Driver, Devontae Adams, Hall of Famers James Lofton and Don Hudson, and should be Hall of Famer Sterling Sharp. 4th all-time in receptions behind Driver, Adams, and Sharp, and 3rd all-time in receiving touchdowns behind Devontae and Hudson in Packers history. Gil, Don Hudson caught 99 touchdowns in the non-passing era of the NFL and still caught 26 more touchdown passes than Devontae did in his Packers career. Devontae, who had 18 touchdowns in 2020, which tied Sterling Sharp for the Packers single-season record. Don Hudson was ahead of his time. When I was looking at it, it's like, holy crap, man, this guy was incredible. There's a reason why his number is retired in Lambeau Field. There's a reason why there's a facility named after him.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you look at his numbers, and again, this is in the early years of the passing game. He caught more passes than some teams, like 3 or 4 teams during a couple of the better years of his career. So he really invented the modern passing tree as far as running patterns and all of that. Absolutely. You know, there was something going around on social media this week. Who was the best receiver in Packers history? And Hudson wasn't even on the list.
That's a joke.
And every time I just answered Don Hudson, you know, I mean, and that's not to disrespect Lofton and Sharp and Driver and Devontae and Antonio Freeman. I mean, the Packers, Max McGee, Boyd Dowler, they've had so many great receivers over the years, but I can't go against Don Hudson.
I can't believe it. What did a 12-year-old put together that list? Don Hudson is he's easily the number 1 receiver in Packer history. Devontae was on his way until he got out. Devontae definitely was on his way. But bonus question for you, Gil. Who was the last Packers defensive player to sign 3 consecutive multi-year contracts with the team. And he was a member of the Super Bowl team in 2011.
Defensive player. Gonna say Clay Matthews.
It was not Clay Matthews, but it was a different linebacker. This is a tricky one. This is a bit of a, and I'll explain why in a bit.
AJ Hawk.
It was AJ Hawk, yes. Just before Nelson had signed his 3rd contract with the Packers, Hawk signed 3 consecutive multi-year contracts with Green Bay. The former 5th overall pick signed his rookie deal in 2006. He agreed to a 5-year extension in 2011. Then he signed a new 3-year deal in 2013, which superseded that 2011 deal. So kind of a unique situation, but technically 3 multi-year contract extensions. And then former defensive end Aaron Cameron, he also signed 3 consecutive contracts with the Packers, but his second contract was a 1-year prove-it deal, and then he signed a multi-year contract extension after that. So there you go, Gil. Jordy Nelson was the most recent one. AJ Hawk was the most recent defender. Kenny Clark, he's in some special territory if he does sign that 3rd multi-year contract with Green Bay, which I hope he does.
I hope he does too. And as soon as he does, well, of course, we will break it all down for you right here on No Huddle Radio. Well, that is going to do it for us today. We'll be right back here next week. Follow us on Twitter at Gil Packers and at GB Packers Sean to stay up to date on all things Packers or to ask us questions. Or you can email us at gbpackersean@gmail.com. Make sure you subscribe to Packers Talk on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And a big thanks to PackersTalk.com for powering our show. And thank you for listening. Until next time, go Pack Go.
Go Pack Go.